to be very negative in our own heads about ourselves. So if you look at all the situations where you'd be talking to your child or a best friend, you would never ever speak like that to yourself. What is it that we're doing to ourselves before we actually go into this conflict? It's about the reframe around naming this as I'm stuck here because I keep conditioning myself to do something that is making me be a hindrance to myself. And it's naming that. So I think
noticing a pattern.
Yeah. And I think the costliest move isn't the blow up in itself. It's not about the actual blow up. It's that what you do before it. It's the quiet withdrawal. It's this going silent. It's about over accommodating. It's about crossing boundaries. It's what we do all the time, absorb tension. Trying to keep the peace, we absorb tension. And I've seen it time and time again where you go into a high-performing environment, it's generally that, how can I mitigate this? How can I defer the damage by accommodating something in myself?
Welcome to this week's episode of Connecting the Dots. I'm back with someone many of you will remember, Pinky Ghadiali, executive coach, accredited mediator, board advisor, and a member of the Collective Core. Last time we spoke on the podcast, we talked about conflict management, and today we're going to get even more practical because gender balance at the top of many organizations is still quite stagnant, and there are 3 skills that decide who breaks through: conflict, negotiation, and assertiveness. And for each one, we'll get into what holds women back and what good looks like. Pinky, welcome back.
Hi, Jer. Thanks for having me.
Hi. So excited to dive in. So before we get into these 3 skills, let's reintroduce you again properly for anyone who missed that. I would recommend, and I'll put that in the show notes, our original podcast on conflict and negotiation, because it was really rich and nuanced conversation. But connect the dots for us and our listeners. How did you get from optometry and healthcare into executive coaching and advising boards?
Great question. I've spent the last 18 years watching brilliant clinical teams fall apart over things that had nothing to do with clinical skill. It was all about the communication. It was about the conversation that they were having or not having. And then I switched to leadership, executive coaching, really focusing on why that was. And that's what drew me into what I do now, straight into industries such as fitness, which I think this is full of the same pattern, right? Like there's other industries across the board where you've got technically brilliant people. You've got PTs, coaches, founders, businesses where teams are held back, not just by performance, it's by the fact that they're not able to communicate because they haven't been trained in conflict and they were never trained to handle it. And so now when I'm advising on boards, it's not just about headcount, it's about risk in people. It's not just about the numbers. It's more than that.
I mean, as you're talking, and I'm reflecting on my experience in teams over time, it is really that. It's communication. It's communication around expectations. It's the feedback loop about what do you understand, what do you need. And when there's friction, the ability to navigate through that friction so that it's a bump, not a mountain. So I think we're gonna get into all of those things that you're passionate about, and you've built this chapter of your career on today. You have 2 businesses, and I think it's another important part of your introduction. You've got Net Women and Mindset by Pinky. So what gap were you seeing and trying to address that made you start them?
Firstly, talented women burning out or being managed out because they were not able to handle a conflict or a grievance or an issue that might have come up within an organization where they've had to exit because of a grievance or something had gone wrong in a relationship within the business. And I think that both of my businesses work side by side. So Mindset by Pinky is across the board, and we're looking at senior leaders who are struggling with exactly what we've talked about, the communication side, the breakdown in communication, being more emotionally intelligent, being able to regulate yourself so you can go into a meeting or a conversation without causing disrepair. We're talking about sometimes we often say what we don't mean to say, and that doesn't come across the right way. And then the fallout is exactly that snowball effect of this was such a small thing, and then it created a massive thing. And now we've got talented women and men leaving an organization or a company because of it. So I noticed this pattern from looking from the outside in, just working in healthcare, but also it happens across the board. And I think most people think mediation. So doing mediation is really something about what happens after the relationship has failed. But actually, that's the wrong way around. The entry point for mediation is where you're managing a loss and preventing a loss rather than trying to manage that loss.
Yeah. When you were talking about, communication and how often we say things we don't mean to say, I mean, I think that probably has to do with a little bit of how quickly or slowly we verbally process something. And when you were in elementary school, you got to write with pencil so that you could erase it. I sometimes wish we could speak with pencil or have that as a mindset. It's just like, I'm working it out right now. It's going to be messy. Let me speak with pencil until, I don't know, that sounds ridiculous when I say it, but you get what I mean. It's like giving permission to be messy in the conversation until you've found the point where you mean what you say, because sometimes you just have to get it out and work with it before you can really get specific about what you mean in conversations, and certainly when emotions are high.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at school, if you're as old as I am, you had a blackboard, more recently whiteboards, and everything you wrote down, you could erase. It doesn't work like that when you're speaking to somebody.
No, definitely not. And it's, creating the safety so that you can be a little bit messy and wipe it off the board until you get to that point where it's like, yes, this is what I mean. Okay. So our broad category of what we're talking about today has to do with women's leadership, because we are not anywhere close to gender balance or gender parity in senior leadership positions across industry, and certainly not at board level. And we know how important this is for high performing teams. So we see in our own experience and in our own world, and I know you see this a lot because there are a lot of the people that you end up working with, that they're core skills that women need to break through. And we want to address those three in this podcast. So or three of them. It's probably not completely comprehensive, but I think they're the big rocks that if you tackle these are going to make a big difference. We're going to talk about conflict, negotiation, and assertiveness. So I thought let's deal with the scariest one of all first. Let's tackle conflict, because I think that's one of the ones that people tend to avoid the most. So what's the worst thing a woman can do in a business situation where conflict arises? And what would that business scenario look like in most of the cases, if there is a most of the cases you're dealing with, or so that we can be specific at a case that recurs often?
I think, first of all, I want to reframe this. I want to talk about not what women do wrong. It's what we've been trained to do for our reward. And I think that as humans, we tend to be very negative in our own heads about ourselves. So if you look at all the situations where you'd be talking to your child or a best friend, you would never ever speak like that to yourself. So the first thing is that what is it that we're doing to ourselves before we actually go into this conflict? It's about the reframe around naming this as I'm stuck here because I keep conditioning myself to do something that is making me be a hindrance to myself. And it's naming that. So I think
noticing a pattern.
Yeah. And I think the costliest move isn't the blow up. in itself. It's not about the actual blow up. It's that what you do before it. It's the quiet withdrawal. It's this going silent. It's about over accommodating. It's about crossing boundaries. It's what we do all the time, absorb tension, trying to keep the peace. We absorb tension. And I've seen it time and time again where you go into a high performing environment, it's generally that how can I mitigate this? How can I defer the damage by accommodating something in myself? And how I compare that is in the fitness world, you would never let an athlete train through pain. So why would you do exactly the same thing as a leader with unresolved conflict? Why go through the pain of doing that to yourself before you even get into that conversation?
Mm-hmm. So if I recognize everything that you're saying is like absorbing the tension, keeping the peace. These are all like the pleasing element, making sure that everyone's comfortable and happy. So like these are things that are programmed into women, so that when you go into a situation where there's conflict, you're a buffer already. So you're going in with a different intention maybe than another counterpart. And because of that, what does that set me up for? So like if you're saying I've got this programming and I'm also probably really critical towards myself, am I taking the conflict on too personally to be neutral about it? Like what's happening?
So what you're doing immediately is you're setting yourself up to fail because you've gone in with the conditioning of I can cross this boundary, which is my own boundary. Maybe I don't have a boundary, but you go across the boundary. You've already set yourself up to then possibly not resolve the conflict the way it should go. And I think that's a really important thing that nobody actually knows how to pre-frame or do a warm-up. We all need a bit of a warm-up. Exactly what you were saying about how do we set this up to succeed rather than to fail? So anything that we've actually had a conversation where we've got conflict and you are saying something and you don't mean to say it, how do you set yourself up to actually mean what you say? So going into a conversation, having direction, getting honest and saying, this is actually what I want. And it's not a warm up. It's something where you need to do it in a almost like a checklist kind of way.
Okay. So I'm imagining all of the conditioning that I'm carrying. I'm imagining my inner critic probably being very loud going into that conversation. And then I'm imagining my emotional state, which is high anxiety, high stress. Neither one of these lead to calm level articulation of what's actually happening. So you're right. I'm absolutely set up to fail. And then the other thing that you said that really made a whole lot of sense to me, or maybe I'm reading into it, is like the conflicts probably arise because of a gap in expectations and maybe someone treading on boundaries. Like those two things probably exist in some degree with every conflict, which is why communication and safety is so important. Because if I didn't communicate my expectations but still held them, then I've got disappointment and frustration, and I'm pushing someone maybe past their boundaries and they're not communicating that. So we've got this tension that's being broken down with high emotion and low communication. So how do I reframe with all of those factors and set myself up for a good conversation? How do I work with myself?
I think the first thing to do is recognize that you need to have direction, first of all. So if you work backwards from where you are now and get honest, you need to know your absolute non-negotiable before you're under pressure, and not to allow that line to be crossed. So you've got that imaginary line and you do not want that to be crossed.
In terms of outcome?
Yes.
Okay.
And then make sure that, so in fitness, we know about performance. We know about performance under pressure. So imagine this is a pressurized situation. This is your warm up. get honest with your own state. So you will have what you mentioned there about perhaps your heart's racing, you're feeling anxious, you've got sweaty palms, you've got butterflies in your stomach.
Mhm.
Think about, what am I bringing in physically? Not just what I want to say, but what is my body saying? Because that's really important, because whatever your body is saying, it's going to then come out with what you say physically when you speak. Then also look at separating the person from the problem. So what do they need versus how they're saying it? And what do you need versus how you're going to say it? So you need to separate that, because the emotions are still going to be there. You're going to still feel the way you feel about that person, but from what they've said or from what you said, that just gets messy. So we've got to separate that and decide, we've already decided the goal. So when we open on purpose. When I talk about opening on purpose, I talk about pausing for 3 seconds and then talking about what you want. So all of those things combined make a framework which will help you in any conversation that you have. And hopefully that's some semblance of a checklist that you can follow when you go into a conversation.
So if I'm translating what I understand from this, like, this is nervous system regulation. So moving me in from like fight or flight into like calm. So and there are plenty of tools that can be used to do that, even if you only have 30 seconds. Like, there's some box breathing techniques will definitely calm you down, taking a moment just to center yourself. Like, all of those things are really good. And then that makes sure that when I walk in the room, I'm not putting off an energy level that's going to, I don't know, like create triggers or almost be like I'm a firework about to go off.
Yeah. I think the challenge is when you go in your mind and you go, just stay calm. And you've got that going on in the back of your head, right? Your brain's saying, just stay calm.
It's a gremlin.
It's awful advice.
Yeah.
I think there is a mechanism that you can use, which is much better. And I call it the 4 Bs. So you check in with your body, your breath, your belief, and then there's a bridge. So I use this specifically because I know that as fitness professionals and for performance, you talk about this kind of nervous system regulation. So the challenge is, when you are applying that for fitness, you don't apply it to conflict. And I'd like you to think about it in that way. So walking in dysregulated to, say, a competition or something that you're doing is going to be a negative effect. So why are you walking to a hard conversation in exactly the same dysregulated way? Because you're not going to get the outcome you need. So I think if you run a fitness studio, you are, say, for example, you've had a fallout with, say, your senior coach, someone you trust who's been there for years, and whatever that fallout is, they've done something, they've not checked with you first, and you've just found out about it from the third person, and you're about to address it, right? So it's a real conflict issue that's happened where you are. First thing, check in with your body. What's actually happening physically? Have you got a tight jaw? Are your shoulders up around your ears? Is your stomach feeling all churny and not quite right? You've noticed the tightness. So I want you to name it. My chest is tight, my breathing shallow. That's nothing. That's just information. So you've already named that sensation. When you say it out loud, you're already saying to autopilot, which is what your body's gone into, to say, acknowledge the fact that this is happening right now. This is my physical reaction to this conversation I'm about to have. Then look at your breath, because that's probably the first thing that's going to happen. Is your breathing is going to be shallow. Your chest is going to tighten, and it's going to keep you in that flight, fight, fright,
freeze.
That freeze. You walk in and you'll come out thinking this is an attack. And that's what you don't want, because when you stop breathing, you stop thinking. So before you go and knock on the door or try and speak to them, pause. Allow yourself to take those breaths, those longer breaths. Use box breathing. And that is you psychologically and physiologically saying, calm your nervous system down, because you're going in, it's a conversation, it's not a threat. Then the belief part. So already you're thinking in your mind, they're trying to undermine me. doesn't respect me. This is a power play. I'm not happy about this. You're already believing in all of these things, and you're going to be accusatory and you're going to be defensive. We know that. You're going to go in and you're going to be trying to defend yourself. That's human nature. That's normal. That's okay. However, if you ask yourself, what is it that's a version of me that isn't about me? What is it? What is the version of this story that's not about me? Maybe it's because they're trying to protect the team from a decision. Maybe there's a disagreement within their team and they haven't communicated that. Maybe there's a different belief going on completely that you're wrong, that you might be wrong. And finally, the bridge. I think when you go in, you immediately come out with, you need to stop doing this. You need to stop it. And it's an attack, right? You need to stop going behind my back. You need to come and speak to me directly.
Almost a threat.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But
and that's going back to the attack thing that I need to get out of when I show up in the meeting. Okay.
You're trying to protect yourself, aren't you? And that's natural. That's normal. How about we test it and we say, I've noticed that you've changed something about the programming and it's happened a few times without you checking in with me. I want to understand what's happening. I want to be aligned on this before anything changes further. So what this does is it invites a conversation. It doesn't sound defensive. It means that it's a bridge because the sentence is open on purpose. If you go in with, why are you doing, why? That is going to bring up defensiveness.
Sure.
So if you go in with, I want to understand more about what's going on here. I want us to be aligned before we make any changes to the group. If you think about it from the other person's shoes, they've already thought, okay, yeah, this is a good point because you're already not reacting to it. There is a reason behind it. And I think that's really important. I think by the time most people open their mouths in conflict, already points 1 to 3, so your body, breath, and belief have already happened without you even noticing. Yeah. And you're going into bridge, which is your last 10%. So if you go in with 1, 2, 3 first, bridge is going to happen automatically because your brain is going to start thinking conversation, not attack, threat, react. It's always going to work the way that you want it to.
Curiosity, safety, like shared purpose. No, I really like this because when you're right, the storytelling part for those of us who are overthinkers, and I think there's a lot of us out there, we have wonderful imaginations, and the dark side of these wonderful imaginations is in the gap of information. We fill that in with a story, and that's what you're telling us to explore with curiosity rather than assuming that we're right with the stories that we created in that information gap. So I'm going to get my body calm and regulated. I'm going to own my stories and be curious about it. Like one of my favorite authors is Brene Brown, and she actually encourages people to say things like, all right, here's the current situation. The story that I'm telling myself is, and then share your story with the other person just to gut check it a little bit. Because the more you do that, they can be like, no, you've got that completely wrong. And then you get that feedback that, wait, my assumption was incorrect. So maybe I need to slow down with my assumptions a little bit. So yeah. And then if you've created that foundation with your body and your belief, then whatever happens next is going to come from the right place to really create collaboration and resolution, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you want. You want this and I can guarantee if you use this framework for your conversations going forward, your difficult conversations, you will already be winning. You're already on the path to success with just this small shift.
I want to ask one more question because I know it happens. And in the event that the conflict gets abusive because you have someone who may have self-regulation problems or anger management problems, what do you do in that situation where it gets personal and you end up on the receiving end of a personal attack? What is your advice in that situation? Because I know it does happen. It has happened.
Yeah. And I think in that moment, you've always got to remember that's not about you. It's about them.
Yeah.
Secondly, never ever react. That is the worst thing you can do, is respond to react. You need to pause. You need time to walk away. You need to just state that I really need to go away and think about this. Can we talk about this tomorrow? Because giving the space is, firstly, the discomfort of what they've just said is back on them, because you've already said, I'm not going to have this conversation with you now.
I don't take this. Yeah.
And you don't even need to complicate it. You just need to say, I would rather talk about this tomorrow, and walk away. And then secondly, what you're doing is you're putting the power back to you. You then can go away, regroup, think about the 4Bs, think about what you want out of this conversation, and have some time. And I always say sleep on these things, because just doing it in the moment, sometimes you miss things, and then you're kicking yourself going, oh, I wish I'd said that. Why didn't I say that? Or why did I say it that way? And I should have said it this way. All these things that we think about. And I don't think it's just the overthinkers. I think it's everyone. Everyone who has a difficult conversation, and you are emotionally intelligent enough to know that actually what I've said there is okay, but I should have said that. I wish I'd done that, and go back and I want to change it. But however, if you go away and you say, I want some time to think about this, that's okay. You're well within your rights, your boundaries, well within what you need to say that, requesting for something that is okay.
To let the emotions drop, and that everybody has a chance to process what's happening and hopefully come back to the table a little bit better. Doesn't always happen that way, but at least you're in the driver's seat.
Exactly. And I think a lot of the time, if you are not emotionally intelligent enough and you are already like that, you do need some time, and you'll be surprised the angle that they may take the next time after they've calmed down and after the emotions have subsided a little bit. It will be a totally different conversation.
This is really, really valuable advice and usable tools that can be directly applied. So thank you very much. Let's move to negotiation. So negotiation is so important. And the gender pay gap is still a very real thing that we're working on, to make sure that women are paid the same as our male counterparts for everything. And I think that one of the things that we can get much stronger about is making sure that we're asking for what we're worth, and we hold the line with that. And that's a part of negotiation. So in your experience, which negotiations are the most important, and what are the tendencies that may hold women back?
Every negotiation you have is important, because everything that you do in terms of you're negotiating because you want a better deal, a pay rise, promotion.
This is the big one. I think let's focus on pay rise, because this is an area where I've had many conversations with many uncomfortable women in this category.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a confidence problem. I think it's that I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about the pattern that we have going on in our heads of negotiating against your own inner voice. Before anyone actually asks you to concede at anything, you're already playing yourself down, and you're already saying, oh, I'm not worthy of that. I'm never going to get that. That's no way going to be. How do you know? How do you know? You've assumed a lot of things there. And often when I speak to my clients, I always ask that question. How do you know? You don't. There is absolutely no way of knowing what the other person is thinking, what they're going to do. It might surprise you,
what the budget is. Yeah.
It might surprise you what they're going to say. It might surprise you what they might turn around and not argue with you at all and go, yeah, sure, you can have it. How about you spin that story and that belief instead of saying, I'm never going to get it?
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the time when we negotiate, instead of phrasing it as a statement, we'll ask a question. As young girls, I think we've always been taught to ask politely and ask a nice question to get what you want. Let's start asking by phrasing it as a statement instead, which is extremely important.
I think that's really powerful, because, one of the things that I hear in the podcast and I speak about and we've spoken about over and over again is the system that we're working in, the business system that we are working in is not designed by us for us. And the rules are not designed for the programming that we have. So I'm sure there needs to be a little bit of opposite day in terms of like if we're, being polite and we're not pushing and those things aren't happening, well, that's not going to get us what we need in terms of compensation. So we have to be comfortable with being a little bit bolder, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And,
Yeah.
use the 4 Bs again. They're there
Okay.
for a reason, right? So for instance, if you're going in and you're wanting a pay rise and you are going in with an offer, their first offer is way below what you want, right? You're going to feel the same things that you felt before. So your body's going to tighten. The same reaction that you have for every conversation that's been difficult is going to come back. So notice it. Talk about it. My body is this, and notice that discomfort. Breathe, pause, breathe, look at your belief system. If I ask for this, they're going to think I'm difficult and they're going to walk away. They're going to say no. This might be my only shot. That's your default story. That's what you've been telling yourself over and over again about the fact that you're not worthy of this pay rise. And then you ask yourself, what's the version where pushing back is normal and expected and not risky? So this is going to be more like what your number is going to look like. So then look at that number and talk about the bridge. So thanks for that. Based on this and the results that I've given, I'm looking for this. That's it.
I want to add another step to the negotiation, particularly in compensation, or propose to add another step to your Bs. And it is another B. So it can be like the fourth B. And that's the business case, because I feel like, when you know enough about your history and your impact, that you can imagine the business impact that you're going to make when you take on a new role. If you know that, then knowing what your compensation is, it becomes a very easy conversation. It's like, I'm going to bring this, I'm asking for this, and that's that. And on the other side, if it's a raise, if you're asking for a raise, again, now you've got the data of your actual performance to work with. And you have another piece of information that I think a lot of people skip. And that is, what would it cost to replace you? And that's what you should ask for. Because, when you start working in an organization and start climbing up the ladder, that's when you lose momentum on your earnings. It's when you make jumps between companies, you can make these big negotiation leaps. But I think that you're looking at it wrong in that case, because it's going to cost them way more to replace you than it is for
pay rise,
for you to keep going.
Yeah, definitely. I think this turns into a retention issue within the organization. And I think you need in your head to add to that is the results that you provide. Not only that, know your walkaway number before you even go in.
It's your boundary.
Yeah, don't go in. This is exactly what we're talking about with the example I talked about before, is that knowing what your goal is, not before you go in the conversation, not during the conversation, because that's just going to confuse your brain. You need to act that first. Make sure that you know that number. Don't talk about ranges. There are no ranges. You need a fixed number, and say that number out loud and make sure you're confident about that number. Rehearse it. Talk about it in a room. So you're not going and squirming and going a question mark, like 100,000. No.
Don't end it on a high note.
Your tone
Don't
matters.
end it like a question.
Yes, this is what I'm talking about. It's not about questions. It's about statements. 100,000. That's it. And don't even
200,000, 300,000. Go.
Don't even question it. And the fact that you're questioning it it makes me cringe when I hear women who I coach who do that. When I say to them, so what did you do? And what did you actually ask for? And they do that at the end. And I'm like, no, this is where you're questioning your own self, your own ability, and somebody else hears that. They're not going to give you it. purely based on that. It's just, you lose confidence on that question. So remember to position yourself, your nervous system regulation, this whole pacing, tone reset, which I've done a whole series on that, by the way. So if anybody's struggling with that on tone,
we'll link to this. Yeah. And I also think that, when you go through that exercise of looking at the value that you're going to contribute or the value that you have contributed or the cost to replace, like if that doesn't click for you in terms of your value versus the number that you're going to ask for, hopefully that changes that the gremlin in your head that's overthinking or maybe planting some seeds of doubt. Wonderful. Thank you very much. That was very helpful to go through. And now assertiveness, because it's like this, I think assertiveness is possibly linked to confidence in my head, but I don't know how you define it, or like, can maybe we start there? Is like, what is assertiveness to you?
I think that word assertiveness gets, for women, it gets mislabeled as aggression. And I think
aggressiveness. Yeah.
For so long, people have said, "Oh, you're being too aggressive." So I think that this is really one of those things where we're already battling that as women before we even go into a conversation, because immediately from the outside in, most people think that that's what it is, aggression. So I think for me, it's about how do we overcome that before we even go into a conversation. I think that's a difficult thing to do, because you can't change a perception of other people.
No, but you can name it when it's mirrored back at you, right? Like particularly if it's a double standard, because it's celebrated in men. Assertiveness is celebrated in men, and it's often criticized or mislabeled in women.
Yeah.
So, and that's like that handcuffed situation that we find ourselves in, is that, it becomes well, why aren't you being the accommodating one that's, absorbing the tension and making it better? And it, like, there is definitely a difference between assertiveness and aggression. And to me, it's intent. Like with assertiveness, the point is being clear and direct, but with no intent to hurt. There's an empathy, a positive empathy with assertiveness, that with aggression, at least in my own definition of it, that's the key differentiator. It's a lack of empathy, and the intent can be a little bit more selfish or with the intent to harm.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that if we then look at the 4Bs again, and we look at the body doing exactly the same thing when we go into a conversation that might be a little bit uncomfortable for you, because usually you are that accommodating person that just says yes to everything, and you've kept the relationship easy for so long. And now all of a sudden there's something that's happened where, for instance, deadlines are being missed. You've absorbed certain things that have been happening. How do you then approach it? Because you're always being seen as the nice person that isn't assertive or doesn't actually ask for anything. And then look at your breath again. The other thing I must say about this is women have this ability to say sorry before they even go into a conversation. Like, sorry, I know you're busy, but, and it's like, don't do that. It's
take up space.
Yeah, it's like you've already completely moved the conversation for them to actually deal with the issue, rather than you having to say to them, it's not about looking tough. It's just the fact that you want to have the conversation with them about this. So stop apologizing is my first thing. And the second thing is the belief. If I'm direct about this, I'll damage the relationship. They're not going to talk to me again. They'll think that I'm being assertive, aggressive, and, it just then creates this complete stop. It's already that, you've already said to yourself, this is going to damage the relationship. And it's the resentment then that builds from that. So
you're telling your stories in your head, and you're shutting yourself down before you even start. Yeah.
This is exactly what I've been talking about from the beginning, is that we tend to do this because our inner critic or itty bitty shitty committee, which I talk about all the time, goes in your head and it takes over, and it's so much louder than the best friend voice that you have in your head or your superhero voice.
It's easy to criticize. Yeah.
Yeah. So instead, what I would probably say is, going back to everything that we've talked about, the bridge would be something around, I understand this is a busy time, but if there's a way that we could look at deadlines moving forward, that would be great. So you're just stating what you want without the apology at the beginning. And at the same time, you're being assertive, not aggressive. It's just being able to know what that goal is, the outcome that you want. It isn't the risk to the relationship. I think the resentment you build by not being direct, by not being assertive, is the biggest risk to your relationship.
Yeah, because then the frustration and resentment builds, and that's just like, that's like weeds in your garden.
Exactly.
I think my favorite phrase for this is clear is kind. Like, being really clear about what you mean is much better than being nice and not saying it, or avoiding saying the hard things. And I think it's really important that we give ourselves that checklist, that, taking up space, being clear, being direct as a woman, that may be perceived by other people as aggressive. We just need to be aware of it. We don't need to change our behaviors. We need to continue to take up space and do the thing, and, have empathy for it, but still be assertive. And what I was wondering is, like, how much does culture play into this? Because, like, there's a directness continuum across cultures, right?
Yeah.
And there's definitely cultures that have way more comfort with directness. Some versus, I'm in the Netherlands. I think this is probably one of the most direct cultures. And then you forget, when you're interacting with other cultures, that it comes across much harder than intended.
Yes, absolutely. I think it is a definite cultural difference, and some words may land as confident and direct, and some sentences will come across as aggressive in certain cultures. And it also depends entirely on your nervous system when you say it. So when we check into our body, it's that physiological thing that's going on in your body. It's that reaction, which is where that needs practice. It needs training. It's like a skill. It's just like anything. You can't just do it by doing it. You have to practice it. You have to go in with thinking about it beforehand. And going back to the point about boundaries, stop over explaining. Don't go into loads of different things after you said your sentence. Stop apologizing, stop over explaining. Those things do not make things direct or assertive. They just make it fluffy.
Muddled. Yeah.
It confuses the whole issue, and it doesn't benefit you either way.
Well, there's the red line. There's lots of red lines through this, because you're going through body belief bridge and all of these things. But there's also a degree of preparation that you advise on, all, like, with every scenario, particularly when you're expecting yourself to show up maybe differently than your natural tendency would be, if you're working on flexing these skills. So, like, really having an idea of desired outcome, checking in with your stories, and probably rehearsing the message that you're I think that's, if you have a friend to role play, that's a great friend to call the nights before.
Yes, definitely. A friend to talk to, someone that you trust, it would be happy to lend an ear and let you talk through certain things that you're navigating.
And in your experience, like, before you give people this toolkit, how many of them are doing some degree of these steps on their own? Are they arriving there, or are they just in their automation and their own groove going into these conversations?
That's an interesting,
or situations.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that when I work with leaders, we'll set a program, and it's not a program that it's a program that's tailored for their needs, but somewhere in that program there'll be actual scenarios and actual live situations that they've had to deal with, where they will come to me and ask me, how do you deal with this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to deal with this. So breakdowns in relationships, having to fire someone, talking about pay rises, all these things come up. And I think that once you have embedded the conversation and you give people the tools, for instance, I've created the conflicts blueprint, which allows leaders to navigate a breakdown in relationship before it becomes an exit or a legal problem. It's a great diagnostic for a team. So what the leader learns will then pass down to other team members and to people within their team. So I think for what I do on a one-on-one basis is very much around, okay, here's what you need, but actually I'm going to give you more because you need to know about these things to improve the culture within your team, within the whole organization. It could be a team issue. It could be a cultural issue. Unresolved conflict. It may just be called something else. You know, some people don't even know it's conflicts. They just come and see me and go, well, this has happened. And then immediately I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to name it, but that's definitely conflict. Any kind of friction that you're having, conversations that aren't going well, difficult conversations, all of that is definitely a risk to your business. So having that in your back pocket is extremely useful. And yes, from that, they can then implement it for themselves and also for their teams. So yeah, I think once you know what you're doing, then we practice it. And sometimes I do role plays with people so that they're able to then understand what it might look like in real life. For instance, all the examples I've given you are real life scenarios that have happened where people have come and seen me and this is what we've done together. So I think that's useful, but then also there's ongoing peer support. So whenever they've completed the program with me, I'll always suggest it might be good to have a check-in maybe once a month just to go through live examples or scenarios that they're struggling with. Because, you know, we talk about AI giving us help and support in these situations. It's never going to give you a real life situation playing out. And I think it's really important to look at the nuances.
Yeah. And it's not showing up for you in that conversation. Like you can read the steps, but you actually have to be able to read yourself. And that's not going to happen with Claude or Chat or anything. Okay. So you're an executive coach to leaders. So you take people one-on-one through this process and their own bespoke individual journey. How does this work for companies or teams working with you? Like, is this also done on a team level? Are there programs?
Yeah, we can also talk about the conflict blueprint in a team workshop. We can also do group coaching as well. So there's different options within the team. I also do consultative work, which is very much around looking at the actual issue before it gets to the legal stage. And looking at how this could be resolved. So looking at the problem from the outside in and giving unbiased, neutral, confidential perspective on a situation is extremely valuable and have about a 90% success rate on those. So it's worthwhile doing without going down the legal route.
Absolutely. And I've never come across a human or an organization without conflict. So there's always an opportunity to get better at this, and it's going to have a huge impact on your life and your culture within your team. And in terms of getting in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch, Pinky?
LinkedIn.
Okay.
LinkedIn by Pinky G. You can email me, admin@bypinky.com as well. If something landed in this conversation, I'm happy to have a chat.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your insight and your expertise and giving us actually a blueprint for all of these categories that we can improve all of these categories. I'm so sure that, at least from my perspective, I can remember those steps really clearly. And I think it's going to help me have better and more productive conversations and negotiations. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime, and probably there's going to be a next time in the very near future. Thanks for listening to Connecting the Dots. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, share it with someone who'd enjoy it too. You can find all of our episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, And if you follow the show, leave a rating. It helps more people discover our work. Until next time, keep connecting the dots and keep building the future you want to see.